Live on the Westworld Theorycast here, sipping water, baby. Got to have those vital fluids. Okay, so um, Bernard Ford creates this thing to help him. Okay, and what it led me to feel is to try to understand Ford better. You had a good video, Ford's master plan, how he wants to protect this world, and you believe that the IP is the host, that they don't exist anywhere outside this park, which I thought was such a simple idea, but I love that you made that idea
Yeah,
your thesis, because a lot of other people, including myself, have said, oh no, they're on a different planet because they can use hosts for space travel and military applications. But you're so correct in, I love that idea. I'm not sure if it's right, but I would totally accept that they
sure,
don't,
sure.
there are no, that's, and there is certain evidence pointing towards that, which is the way in which most of the guests seem to first interact with the hosts.
That's a really good point.
Not
I
only
didn't even think of that.
William, yeah, not only William, but that man and wife we see who seem to be in the MIB timeline, right? The family with the little boy who says to Dolores, "You're one of them, aren't you?" If he grew up in a place where um, his robot servant was a host, he wouldn't be saying that
You just blew my mind.
to a
Honestly,
host.
that is such a good statement. Like we know, like I mean, of course, it was just a theory that this technology didn't exist in the outside world. Now, I didn't think it existed because the singularity, and essentially there would be a time where robots took over. But that's a whole nother story. But the fact that the people coming into the park and interacting, if robots existed in the world, this they wouldn't have the feeling and the shock that we're seeing them have.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man.
That's why I liked your idea. Well, the more, because at first I rejected it,
Uh-huh.
and the way I try to think scientifically, I just say, why did I reject that right away? It must be bothering
Yeah,
me
yeah.
for some reason. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, wow, it's weird because even if there are two time frames, we have seen people in both of those time frames react both skeptically and in awe to the hosts, and as well as quizzically as to whether or not they can tell whether they're human. And if they were regularly outside and everywhere in a part of normal society, people wouldn't act like that. And also, it wouldn't seem to be that the park would be that special either.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, what would be the point?
yeah, you could go to your local mall, right? And then when you walk through, it's the 1980s at the restaurant, and they talk in different accents, and they are actors from the 80s because they're hosts, right? And
Yeah.
so, because my initial idea was that the IP was everlasting life, that Ford had figured out a way to, like we were thinking with Teresa being that body, or now some people say maybe it's Elsie, if he can do that. I also thought maybe the board member Charlotte, the way she reacted,
Mhm.
was in her body. She
Yeah.
almost seemed like she was new to it. So I don't know, but I
That's a
like
good
your
point. Yeah.
idea. I think that's a
Yeah.
good
So a
idea.
lot of the when I talked about the intentions that Delos had with the IP, um, a lot of people talked about the immortality part of it, and there is some evidence to suggest that that could be it because I believe on the website there's a certain series you go through, and essentially it says, if you died, would you be okay with having your consciousness uploaded?
Okay, I heard of
Um,
this too.
yeah, yeah, and that was all the way back. That's been there since episode one, um, and so that's always been in the back of my mind. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that the host application in the outside world, I mean, that would you could literally do anything, from the home application to military and taking over the world if you would like.
Hmm.
You have a limitless resource that if they die, you recreate and keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Now,
Um,
I want to
and-
take it in a little bit of a different direction and talk about
sure, sure.
what Ford said to Bernard in that conversation, which also struck me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, as to Ford's emotions, his feelings, because it almost seems to me that one of the reasons he doesn't want to let the hosts out of the park is because then he can't guarantee that he can wipe them of their pain.
Mm, okay. And he does talk about how that he envies them essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That their lives are blissful, I believe is how he says it. Um, and and that goes back to wanting to protect the hosts, but then again, I think the show creators are doing something that Game of Thrones did. If you remember the feeling that you got when you first saw Jamie, Jamie Lannister throws Bran out the window, and you're like, okay, well, I hate Jamie.
Spoilers for Game of Thrones,
Oh, I'm
people.
so sorry. Yeah,
That's
I'm
all
so
right.
sorry.
That's the
Yeah,
first episode. Well,
and
that's okay, but just
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
how people are. We got to throw out a spoiler
and then
here.
and then later on, you like Jamie. Like, I mean, Jamie's one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite characters, and I want him to do good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is such
Yeah.
a complete opposite switch emotionally, and I think that that's what the show's doing with characters like Ford. We see Ford, um, being portrayed as a bad guy. The scene with him and Teresa, amazing, but he came out looking like a bad guy, and that was. But if you think about the perspective, that was us seeing it from the perspective of Delos. Now, I mean, I truly think that Ford understands that maybe Delos is not an evil, but I guess a bad corporation. Um, that
Or just a
he knows is trying to
corporation.
steal from them.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
doesn't have the same attachments that he has, They don't have to be
yeah,
so
exactly.
evil.
Yep. Um, and that the hosts are just that. They're there to serve a purpose, and they don't have feelings. Um, and that's really what the show does, is it tries to make you think that they do, but at the end of the day, it's just a computer program. Um, but even still, it doesn't make yourself feel anything different. You're still seeing a human being hurt in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. It's that's what I find so interesting about Ford is he professes such a love for the hosts, but but at the same time and also admits that there is no threshold, right? There's no
Yeah.
threshold between the idea of being a host or a human. Um, but yet he at other times and it seems to be those times are when he's around other people, right? Working in the lab,
Uh-huh.
like when he slashes the cheek of the host.
The
It's just
cheek.
a host.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't cover them.
Yeah.
And then he also did that in front of Bernard. I tend to think that that's the acting part. And really, this guy loves his creations and he loves them and he wants to protect them. And he also, I don't think he likes the fact that they're constantly being murdered, raped, and traumatized. I almost feel like, like
Yeah.
what he would want the park to be what it was in the beginning, which is what I think we saw when they were learning to dance. Like, but the way he says it is, oh no, he does say that does he say he or Arnold was the one who had the idea of the nice stories and they played them again and again and people didn't like them?
Actually, I believe that they say that they proposed 100 storylines. I don't think they said they were good or evil, and then that they all got turned down, essentially, which makes me question who turned them down. But
Yeah, I don't remember that conversation because I thought it was maybe that was the beginning of the kind of him versus Arnold type idea, but
well,
I don't know.
the conversation I'm recalling was the Teresa Ford scene. Um, when they're talking at the plantation.
Oh, there was a different conversation I think that he had, maybe he had it with Bernard, where he says when we first started this place, um, or maybe it is with Teresa, where he says we had the idea, there wasn't all the murder and adventure. It was pleasant storylines, but people got bored. People wanted,
Something that it was like perfectly balanced.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Um, I'm not sure though.
But
Not sure. See, the thing with like Ford's emotion toward the hosts, right? Because we'll see the second that he slashes the face and he identifies that a technician is viewing these hosts as human. He immediately reacts and makes an example right in front of everybody. But then we also see that Ford cares for the hosts.
yeah.
Bernard, for instance, I believe that Ford genuinely cares for Bernard. But that, and so with that, we know that, well, that we know because Ford told us that Arnold cared more about the hosts. And so part of me thinks that maybe Ford is Arnold, right? That the two personalities of,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
I like,
yeah,
okay, now check this out. And we came to this totally spontaneously, but another idea I had proposed was that Arnold is the replica of Ford. He was the original AI or original program or host, maybe all three, right? That existed. Sure. And they always say, write what you know, right? And so what Ford did is he wrote his own story. But he couldn't make him look like him because then everybody wouldn't, it was creepy. So he made him look like Bernard. Maybe it was his favorite professor or something like that he copied that person, but he put his own backstory into it. And the reason why I thought that is the way they repeat each other so much, but that could just be that Bernard's a host. But it just, it led me to believe that, similar to what you're saying of Game of Thrones, and I think we're on the same page here, is I think that Ford is like you're saying, being set up for us, if not to be a hero, but for us to sympathize with him and empathize with him and say, he feels what he's doing is the right thing, even though he's killing people and, in a sense, acting like a god. And I also think, though, conversely, that, or similarly, that Bernard or Arnold, whatever happened 30 years ago, right, with William and the way that we see, because I do think that most of the scenes with her and Bernard in that underground kind of that room where he's leading her and giving her the books, that was 30 years ago, and he's guiding her on that path, which is the path she's now traveling by herself in the quote unquote present time, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think Ford sets it up like it's this great drama between them, and Arnold thought this and I thought this. But that almost seems the way a father would view a son wanting their love, similar to the way he wanted the love of his father.
That's really funny that you brought up family. This has been something that I can't decode, right? There's such a heavy connotation of family in the show. I got the same impression about Ford and Arnold. Of course, Ford and his family we see, and a younger version at least. The duality between Logan and William, their proposed brother-in-laws, with a mystery fiance outside of the park. And then we find out that Teresa has a brother in episode 8. And I don't know why, but I feel like they made a point to say that, you know, like they go, "Hey, has your family been notified?" And Stubbs responds with, "Yeah, we let her brother know," or something like that. I'm like, why not just say, "Yes, we let her family know"?
It's a good catch, man.
They,
Because when you write, you do.
yeah,
That's how you write. You're right.
yeah, exactly. And then in the same episode, the Man in Black talks about his wife and his daughter and the impact that going to the park had on their personal life. I'm like, man, there's such a heavy connotation on family. There's got to be something to it. And I don't know if I don't even think I have a lead on where to go, but I think that Arnold and Ford may be some kind of relation to each other.
See,
Like you said before.
yeah, that's the way I felt, and I also felt that Dolores, the part that she plays in that is, I mean, we see their plans together, right? Dolores and
Uh-huh.
Bernard, they look to be made at similar time. But if we are going on the theory that Bernard, we believe Ford and Bernard basically brought life to them, could it be that what we're seeing in the basement there is exactly that, except it went too far with Dolores, right? Like he kept
Okay.
pushing and pushing, and but I'm not sure whether or not the point was to overtake his quote unquote father, his creator, Ford, or it was to impress him.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Essentially, if you're an AI created for a purpose and you recognize that your creator wants you to excel, and you are an AI and you will continue to excel and excel until you reach a threshold that the human or the creator isn't comfortable with. Um,
And that
and
could
I
play
think
into
essentially that.
yeah, that's the family dynamic that you were talking about. Like Dolores then almost becomes like the daughter. And a lot of times I think all these backstories, and maybe even with MIB, they sound like Ford made them up, dude. They're like, they're all like,
Oh, that would be so crazy. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's funny. When they showed the guy that looked like the Minotaur
Yeah.
in episode 8, I believe, showed him getting shot, and he was so resistant to the bullets. I was like, oh, oh wow, that's how the Man in Black reacted. Like he just took the shot and kept going. Now, of course, we saw that he did get taken down, but that split second, I was like, oh my god, Man in Black's the host. That's it. He's from the original movie, same Man in Black. Here we go.
Yeah. Well,
But
I want to ask you about that.